Maya Chen stared at the contract spread across the mahogany desk, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the pen. The law office smelled of leather and expensive cologne, a world so far removed from the cramped apartment she shared with her ailing mother that it might as well have been on another planet. $50,000 up front, another $150,000 upon delivery of a healthy baby. $200,000 total, enough to cover her mother's experimental cancer treatment, pay off their mounting debts, and maybe, just maybe, give them both a chance at a normal life again. She'd answered the surrogacy advertisement on a whim, never truly believing someone would choose her. But here she was, 26 years old, healthy, and apparently the perfect candidate according to the agency's rigorous screening process. Across from her sat Alexander Hale, though he'd insisted she call him Alex during their first awkward meeting 3 weeks ago. He didn't look like the billionaire tech mogul the tabloids loved to photograph at charity galas and product launches. Today he wore jeans and a simple black sweater, his dark hair slightly disheveled, his gray eyes holding a sadness that money clearly couldn't fix. His wife had died 2 years ago, the agency had explained, and he desperately wanted to fulfill their dream of having a child using the embryos they'd created before her death. He needed a surrogate who understood this wasn't just business. This was his last connection to the woman he'd loved. Maya had read about the accident online. A drunk driver, a rainy night, a life cut short at 32. She'd felt an unexpected kinship with his grief, having watched her own father succumb to heart disease when she was just 18. "You can still back out," Alex said softly, noticing her hesitation. His voice was gentle, lacking the arrogance she'd expected from someone worth billions. "I know this is a huge decision, and I don't want you to feel pressured. There are other candidates." But Maya knew there weren't many others willing to follow the strict requirements he'd outlined, living in his guest house for the pregnancy duration, attending all appointments with him, maintaining a specific diet and exercise routine. Most surrogates wanted anonymity and distance. Alex wanted involvement, connection, the experience of every milestone. He wanted to feel like a father from day one. Maya took a deep breath and signed her name at the bottom of each page, the scratch of pen on paper sealing her fate. She was doing this for her mother, she reminded herself. It was just 9 months. Just a business arrangement. She would carry his child, deliver safely, and walk away with enough money to change their lives. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have predicted, was that Alexander Hale would change far more than her bank account balance. He would change everything she thought she knew about love, sacrifice, and what it meant to truly carry someone's heart. The guest house was larger than any home Maya had ever lived in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a manicured garden where roses bloomed in impossible perfection, their fragrance drifting through the open French doors. The kitchen had marble countertops and appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship, all gleaming chrome and touchscreen displays. The bedroom featured a king-size bed with sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and the bathroom had a tub big enough to swim in. Alex had offered to hire movers, but Maya didn't have much to move, just 3 suitcases of clothes, a box of books, and her mother's favorite photograph from their mantel. She'd left the rest in the apartment her mother would continue to occupy, now with the help of a private nurse Maya had hired with the advance payment. "I hope it's comfortable enough," Alex said, hovering anxiously in the doorway. He'd been nothing but considerate since she'd signed the contract 2 weeks ago, checking in daily to make sure she had everything she needed before moving in. The embryo transfer was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and her hormone treatments had already begun. She felt bloated and emotional, her body preparing for a pregnancy that felt both thrilling and terrifying. "There's a fully stocked fridge, but you're welcome to eat at the main house anytime. Mrs. Chun, my housekeeper, coincidentally also Chin, makes incredible dumplings on Thursdays." He paused, seeming to realize he was rambling. "Sorry, I'm nervous. I haven't lived with anyone since Sarah died." Maya set down her suitcase and turned to face him properly. In the afternoon light streaming through the windows, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He was 38. She knew from the background information the agency had provided, but grief had aged him in ways that numbers couldn't capture. I'm nervous too, she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. I've never been pregnant before. I've never lived anywhere this nice before. I've never been responsible for something so important to someone else. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, and she felt tears threatening. Damn hormones already making her more emotional than usual. Alex stepped into the room, his expression softening. You're not just responsible to me, Maya. You're doing something incredibly brave for your mother, and I respect that more than you know. My own mother died when I was 12, cancer, like your mom. I would have given anything for more time with her. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo, a beautiful Asian woman with laugh lines and kind eyes, holding a much younger Alex on her lap. She was a nurse, worked double shifts to support me. Never complained once. I built my company in her memory, but there are still days I'd trade all of it just to hear her voice again. The raw honesty in his admission made something shift in Maya's chest, a recognition of shared pain that went beyond their contractual arrangement. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two people bound by loss and hope, strangers about to embark on the most intimate journey two people could share. Thank you for trusting me with this, Maya finally said. I promise I'll take good care of your baby. Our baby. Your baby, she corrected awkwardly, unsure of the right terminology. Alex smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. It's okay to be confused about the pronouns. I am too. We'll figure it out together. As he left her to unpack, Maya sat on the edge of the impossibly soft bed and realized she'd made a terrible miscalculation. She'd thought the hardest part would be carrying a child for 9 months and then walking away. She hadn't considered that she might actually come to care about the man who'd hired her to make his dreams come true. 2 weeks after the embryo transfer, Maya sat on the bathroom floor of the guest house at 6 in the morning, staring at 3 plastic sticks lined up on the marble countertop. 3 tests, 3 undeniable pink lines, 3 confirmations of what she'd already suspected when she'd woken up nauseated for the 3rd consecutive day. She was pregnant. Alex's baby, well, Alex and Sarah's baby, was growing inside her right now, a cluster of cells that would become a human being, a living legacy of a love story cut tragically short. Her hands shook as she picked up her phone to text him, then put it down again. This deserved more than a text message. This was the moment he'd been waiting 2 years for, the hope that had kept him going through his darkest days. She found him in the main house's kitchen, already dressed for work in a sharp navy suit, his laptop open on the breakfast bar as he sipped black coffee. He looked up when she entered, and whatever he saw on her face made him go completely still. It's positive, Maya whispered, holding up the tests like evidence in a trial. All 3 of them. I'm pregnant. For a long moment, Alex didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe. Then his coffee mug clattered onto the counter, and he was crossing the space between them, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You're sure? Really sure? His voice cracked with desperate hope, and Maya nodded, finding herself tearing up in response to his emotion. I have the blood test at the clinic this afternoon to confirm, but home tests are pretty accurate, especially 3 of them. She laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that came from the surreal nature of the moment. She was pregnant with a stranger's baby, standing in a kitchen that cost more than most houses, watching a billionaire cry over cheap drugstore pregnancy tests. Alex seemed to catch himself, stepping back and wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm just overwhelmed. Sarah and I tried for 3 years before she died. 3 years of treatments and disappointments and false hopes. And now, in 2 weeks, you've... He trailed off, overcome again. Maya reached out instinctively and squeezed his hand, a gesture of comfort that felt natural despite their formal arrangement. His fingers curled around hers, warm and solid, and for a moment they just stood there, connected by touch and by the tiny spark of life that had taken root between them. We did it together, she said softly. Well, the doctors did most of it, but you know what I mean. You don't have to apologize for being emotional. This is huge. Alex laughed then, a real laugh full of joy and relief, and pulled her into a brief, spontaneous hug. Maya stiffened for just a second. They'd carefully maintained professional boundaries since she'd moved in, but then relaxed into it. He smelled like coffee and cedar, and his embrace felt safe in a way she hadn't expected. "I'm canceling all my meetings today," Alex announced, pulling back with newfound energy. "We're going to the clinic together for the blood test, and then we're celebrating. What do you want?" "Name anything. A trip to Paris, diamond earrings, that restaurant with the 6-month waiting list." Maya laughed, shaking her head. "I just want those dumplings Mrs. Chin makes. And maybe some pickles. Is it too early to have weird cravings?" Alex grinned, already pulling out his phone to text his assistant about clearing his schedule. "It's never too early. I'll have her make a feast. This is the best day I've had in 2 years, Maya. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this." As they drove to the clinic later that morning, Maya stared out the window and tried to ignore the small voice in her head whispering that she was getting too attached, that she needed to remember this was temporary, that in 9 months she would hand over this baby and walk away from Alex Hale forever. The voice was right, of course. But with each passing day, it was getting harder to listen. At 8 weeks pregnant, Maya lay on the examination table in Dr. Morrison's office, her shirt pushed up to expose her still flat stomach while Alex sat in the chair beside her, gripping the armrests like he was preparing for takeoff. The ultrasound technician, a cheerful woman named Rita, squeezed cold gel onto Maya's abdomen and pressed the transducer against her skin, moving it around as grainy black and white images appeared on the screen. Maya had no idea what she was looking at. All looked like abstract art to her untrained eye, but Alex leaned forward, transfixed, his eyes scanning the monitor with intense focus. "There," Rita said, pointing to a small bean-shaped blur in the center of the screen. "That's your baby. And if you listen carefully." She pressed a button and suddenly the room filled with a rapid whooshing sound, like a tiny horse galloping. "That's the heartbeat." Alex's hand shot out and found Maya's, squeezing so hard it almost hurt, but she didn't pull away. She couldn't. She was staring at that pulsing flutter on the screen, that rhythmic proof of life, and feeling something shift fundamentally inside her chest. This was real. There was an actual human being growing inside her, a tiny heart beating at 160 times per minute, a miracle of cells dividing and forming into something extraordinary. "The heart rate looks perfect," Dr. Morrison said, entering the room with Maya's chart in hand. "Everything appears to be progressing beautifully. The due date I'm calculating is July 15th, which means you're right on track." The doctor smiled at both of them, having treated enough surrogacy cases to understand the complex emotions in the room. "Can we get pictures?" Alex asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to remember this moment." Rita nodded and pressed a button, and the printer hummed to life, producing several printouts of the ultrasound images. Alex took them reverently, studying each one like it was a precious artifact. Maya watched him, this powerful man reduced to trembling hands and tear-filled eyes by the sight of an 8-week embryo, and felt her heart crack open just a little more. She'd promised herself she wouldn't get emotionally involved, that this was just a job, a transaction. But how could she remain detached when she was literally carrying someone's hopes and dreams inside her body? When she saw the raw love and longing on Alex's face every time he looked at her growing belly. After the appointment, Alex suggested they grab lunch at a cafe nearby, and Maya agreed, finding herself hungry for more than just food. She was craving his company, the easy conversation they'd fallen into over the past 2 months. They'd developed a routine. Breakfast together most mornings, dinner a few times a week, occasional movie nights in his home theater. He was teaching her about his work in renewable energy technology, and she was introducing him to her favorite novels, lending him dog-eared paperbacks from her collection. What was she like? Maya asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could stop it. "Sarah, I mean, you don't have to talk about her if it's too painful, but I feel like I should know about the woman whose baby I'm carrying." Alex was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. Then he pulled out his wallet and extracted a worn photograph, a stunning woman with auburn hair and green eyes, laughing at something off camera, her hand resting on Alex's chest. She was brilliant, he said softly. An architect who designed green buildings before it was trendy. She could argue with me for hours about anything, politics, art, whether pineapple belongs on pizza. She had this laugh that made everyone around her start laughing too, even if they didn't know it was funny. She wanted kids so badly, used to talk about the family we'd have, the traditions we'd start. His thumb traced the edge of the photograph. Some days I can barely remember her voice, and that terrifies me. But this baby, our baby, it's like I get to keep a piece of her alive. Maya felt tears slip down her cheeks, moved by his obvious love for his late wife. She was lucky to have you, she whispered. And this baby is lucky too. You're going to be an amazing father. Alex looked up at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Understanding, connection, something that felt dangerous and inevitable all at once. I couldn't do this without you, Maya. You're not just a surrogate to me anymore. You're. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. You're becoming a friend. Is that okay? Am I overstepping? Maya should have said yes, should have re-established their boundaries, should have protected herself. Instead, she reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It's more than okay. I'd like to be your friend. And there it was. The moment they both knew they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross, forging a bond that would complicate everything they'd agreed to keep simple. At 15 weeks, Maya woke up to cramping and spotting, her heart immediately racing with panic as she stumbled to the bathroom and saw the blood. Not much, but enough to send terror coursing through her veins. This was Alex's last chance at having Sarah's biological child, and she was failing him. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called him, not caring that it was 4 a.m. He answered on the second ring, alert despite the hour. Maya? What's wrong? Within 20 minutes, they were at the emergency room. Maya in a wheelchair despite her protests that she could walk, Alex beside her refusing to leave her side even when the nurses tried to direct him to the waiting room. I'm the father, he said firmly, and technically he was right, so they let him stay. The next hours blurred together. Blood tests, internal examinations, another ultrasound where they both held their breath until the technician found the heartbeat, still strong, still steady. It's a subchorionic hemorrhage, Dr. Morrison explained when she arrived to review the results. A small bleed between the uterine wall and the placenta. It's actually quite common in the first trimester, though you're a bit further along. The good news is the baby looks completely fine, strong heartbeat, appropriate size, moving around normally. The bad news is you'll need complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer depending on how things progress. She fixed Maya with a stern look. I mean complete rest. No work, no standing for extended periods, bathroom breaks only. This is serious, Maya. We need to give that hemorrhage time to heal. Alex immediately went into problem-solving mode, already pulling out his phone to arrange everything. I'll hire a nurse to stay with her around the clock. And we'll move her to one of the upstairs bedrooms in the main house, so someone's always nearby. I'll work from home. Maya cut him off, her voice sharp with frustration and fear. Alex, stop. I don't need a nurse or to move or to disrupt your entire life. I'll be fine in the guest house. But even as she said it, she knew it was bravado. She was terrified. She'd never been in the hospital except to visit her mother, had never faced a medical crisis of her own. The thought of being alone, of something going wrong with the baby while she was isolated in the guest house, made her chest tight with anxiety. You're not disrupting my life, Alex said quietly, putting his phone away and taking her hand. Maya, you're carrying the most precious thing in the world to me. Let me take care of you while you take care of our baby. Please. The R slipped out so naturally that neither of them commented on it, but Maya felt it settle between them, another shift in their carefully maintained boundaries. She was too exhausted and scared to argue, so she nodded, letting him make arrangements while she lay back against the hospital pillows. The baby was okay. That was all that mattered. Everything else, the confusion about her feelings for Alex, the way he'd held her hand through every examination, the fear in his eyes that matched her own, could be sorted out later. They kept her overnight for observation, and when Maya woke in the pre-dawn darkness, She found Alex asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand still holding hers, his suit jacket draped over him like a blanket. He'd stayed the entire night. She studied his sleeping face, the worry lines that creased his forehead even in rest, the dark circles under his eyes from too many sleepless nights. He cared about this baby, yes, but somewhere along the way she realized he'd started caring about her too. And God help her, she cared about him. Not as an employer or a business arrangement, but as a man who'd shown her more kindness and consideration in 3 months than most people had in her entire life. This was supposed to be simple: carry his baby, take the money, move on. But nothing about Alexander Hale had ever been simple, and Maya was beginning to suspect that walking away from him in 6 months would be the hardest thing she'd ever done. Harder even than signing that initial contract, harder than leaving her mother's bedside, harder than anything she'd experienced before. Because she wasn't just carrying his child anymore. She was, impossibly and inconveniently, beginning to carry his heart too. Bed rest turned out to be excruciatingly boring. Maya had imagined she'd catch up on reading, binge-watch television shows, maybe learn a new language through one of those apps. Instead, she spent most of her time staring at the ceiling of the upstairs guest bedroom in Alex's main house, fighting the urge to get up and move around, and worrying obsessively about the baby. Alex had transformed the room into a comfortable nest, a mini fridge. Stocked with snacks, a large television with every streaming service imaginable, stacks of books and magazines on the nightstand, even a small bell she could ring if she needed anything. The bell was his idea, and she'd laughed when he presented it, but she had to admit it came in handy when she needed water or another pillow, or just company to break the monotony. He worked from home as promised, setting up his laptop in the sitting area of her bedroom, taking conference calls where she could hear him negotiating million-dollar deals in the same gentle voice he used to ask if she wanted Thai or Italian for dinner. Mrs. Chun brought meals on elegant trays 3 times a day, always with fresh flowers and little touches that made Maya feel cherished rather than burdensome. But it was Alex's presence that made the confinement bearable. He read to her in the evenings her favorite novels at first, then branching out to audiobooks they both wanted to try. He taught her to play chess, though she was terrible at it. He brought his tablet to bed, to the chair beside her bed, and they watched terrible reality shows together, making fun of the contestants and creating elaborate backstories for each person. "I think that one's definitely a secret agent," Alex said one afternoon, pointing at a woman on the screen. "Look at how she's assessing the room. That's tactical training." Maya laughed, the sound feeling good after so many days of anxiety. "You think everyone's a secret agent. Last week you were convinced our mailman was undercover." Alex grinned, unrepentant. "He's very suspicious. Always knows exactly when to arrive." These moments of lightness were interspersed with more serious conversations about his childhood, about her father's death, about their fears and hopes and dreams. Maya learned that Alex had built his company from nothing after his mother died, that he taught himself to code at 12 years old in the public library, that his first product was a solar-powered phone charger he'd sold at farmers markets. He learned that Maya had wanted to be a veterinarian before her father got sick, that she loved old movies and hated horror films, that she'd never been outside of California. "When this is all over and the baby's safely here," Alex said one evening during week 2 of bed rest, "I want to take you somewhere. You and your mother. Anywhere in the world you want to go." Maya turned to look at him, surprised. "Alex, you don't owe me a vacation. You're already paying me, and you've been incredibly generous." He cut her off with a shake of his head. "It's not about owing you. I want to do it. These past few months, you've given me something I didn't think I'd ever have again: hope. Purpose. A reason to think about the future instead of just surviving the present. That's worth more than money." His gray eyes held hers, intense and sincere, and Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. Maya was acutely aware that she was in bed, wearing one of the silk pajama sets Alex had ordered for her hair messy and her face free of makeup. She must look terrible after 2 weeks of bed rest, but the way Alex was looking at her made her feel beautiful. I don't want your gratitude, Maya whispered, not even sure what she meant, what she was asking for. I know, Alex said softly, leaning forward in his chair. That's what makes you different from everyone else in my life. You've never wanted anything from me except… He stopped himself, seeming to realize they were venturing into dangerous territory. Except what? Maya prompted, her heart pounding. Alex stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Except honesty. Authenticity. You treat me like a person, not a bank account. Do you have any idea how rare that is? He paced to the window, his back to her. These past 2 weeks, being here with you, taking care of you, it's the closest I've felt to happy since Sarah died. And I know that's not fair to you, that I'm probably making you uncomfortable, that you signed up to be a surrogate, not a companion for a grieving widower. The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in Maya's chest. You're not making me uncomfortable, she admitted. You're scaring me because I feel it too. This thing between us that we're both pretending isn't happening. But Alex, in 4 months I'm going to have your baby and hand her over to you and walk out of your life. That's the agreement. Getting attached to each other is only going to make that harder. The words hung in the air, acknowledgement of the impossible situation they'd created. Alex turned back to face her, his expression torn between hope and despair. What if we rewrote the agreement? The question was barely a whisper, but it changed everything. Dr. Morrison gave Maya the all-clear at her 18-week appointment, declaring the hemorrhage fully healed and lifting all restrictions on her activity. Maya should have been relieved to return to the guest house, to re-establish some boundaries between herself and Alex after 2 weeks of forced intimacy. Instead, she found herself lingering in the main house, joining him for breakfast each morning, staying for dinner each evening, filling the spaces between with conversations that ranged from silly to profound. They were existing in a strange limbo, both aware of Alex's question from weeks ago, what if we rewrote the agreement? But neither willing to address it directly. It hung between them like a held breath, waiting to be exhaled. The baby, at least, was thriving. Maya's small bump had become more pronounced, a definite curve that Alex couldn't resist touching whenever they were near each other. He'd asked permission first, tentative and respectful, and Maya had agreed. Now it was routine, his hand on her stomach during their evening movie sessions, feeling for kicks that were still too faint to detect. They'd learned at the last ultrasound that they were having a girl, and Alex had promptly turned one of the upstairs bedrooms into a nursery, painting the walls a soft sage green and filling the space with a beautiful crib, a rocking chair, and what seemed like hundreds of stuffed animals. Maya had helped choose the decor, and it had felt so natural, so right, that she'd pushed away the voice reminding her this wasn't her baby, wasn't her nursery, wasn't her life. One evening in late March, Alex knocked on the guest house door around 8 o'clock, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate and looking uncharacteristically nervous. Can we talk? He asked. Maya's heart jumped into her throat, but she nodded, moving aside to let him in. They settled on the couch, the same spot where they'd watched 100 movies together, and Alex set down the hot chocolate with shaking hands. I've been thinking about what I said during your bed rest. About rewriting the agreement. And I need to know if I'm completely crazy for even suggesting this, or if you've been thinking about it too. He looked at her with such raw hope that Maya felt tears prick her eyes. I've been thinking about it constantly, she admitted. But Alex, I don't even know what it is. What are you actually suggesting? That I stay on as a nanny? That we remain friends after the baby's born? That we… She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the possibility that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Alex took her hands in his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. I'm suggesting that we stop pretending this is just a business arrangement. I'm suggesting that somewhere between the contract signing and right now, I fell in love with you. Not because you're carrying my daughter, though I'm grateful for that every single day. But because you're brilliant and kind and funny and you call me out when I'm being ridiculous and you make me want to be a better person. Maya's breath caught, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. Alex, you're grieving. You're vulnerable. You might be confusing gratitude with… He shook his head firmly. I loved Sarah. I will always love her. But she's gone, and I spent 2 years just existing, not living. Then you walked into my life, and suddenly I was laughing again, looking forward to tomorrow, feeling things I thought I'd never feel again. That's not grief talking, Maya. That's me finally allowing myself to heal enough to love someone new. If you don't feel the same way, I understand. This is a lot, and it's complicated, and maybe I'm being selfish even bringing it up. But I had to tell you the truth. The truth. Maya had been running from her own truth for weeks now, telling herself that her feelings for Alex were just a byproduct of proximity and hormones and gratitude. But that was a lie, and she knew it. She'd fallen in love with him during their chess games and their late-night conversations and the way he brought her tea without being asked and remembered every small thing she told him. She'd fallen in love with his gentleness and his intelligence and the way he still talked to Sarah sometimes when he thought no one was listening, telling her about their daughter. She'd fallen in love with Alexander Hale despite every intention to keep her heart protected, and now she had to decide whether to admit it or run. "I'm terrified," Maya whispered. "Of what happens if this doesn't work out. Of whether you'll regret this in 6 months or a year. Of whether I'm just a replacement for her. Of loving you and losing you." Alex cupped her face in his hands, his eyes fierce with emotion. "You could never be a replacement for Sarah. You're entirely your own person, and that's who I love. As for the rest, Maya, I can't promise we won't have problems or that everything will be perfect. But I can promise that I will show up every day and choose you every day and love both you and our daughter with everything I have. If you're willing to take that risk with me." Our daughter. Not his daughter. Not Sarah's daughter. Their daughter. The words unlocked something in Maya's chest, and she realized she'd already made her decision somewhere along the way. Maybe during bed rest, or at that first ultrasound, or the moment she'd signed the contract and seen hope bloom in his eyes. She'd been his from the start. It had just taken her this long to admit it. "I love you," she said simply, and watched his face transform with joy. "I don't know how we make this work or what the future looks like, but I love you, and I want to try." Alex kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Maya kissed him back, tasting chocolate and tears and the beginning of something she'd never dared to hope for, a love she could keep, a family she could belong to, a home that was hers not through contract but through choice. Maya's mother, Linda Chin, was a force of nature despite her illness. At 54, she'd been fighting stage for breast cancer for 2 years, enduring chemotherapy and radiation with the same stubborn determination she'd applied to raising Maya alone after her husband died. When Maya called to tell her she needed to talk about something important, Linda insisted on meeting at their old apartment rather than the hospital where she was currently receiving treatment. "Hospitals are depressing," she'd said firmly. "Whatever you need to tell me, let's do it somewhere that feels like home." So Maya and Alex made the drive to her old neighborhood, a working-class area of modest apartments and corner stores that couldn't have been more different from Alex's estate. Linda opened the door wearing a colorful headscarf over her bald head, her face thin but her eyes sharp and assessing. They landed immediately on Alex, then dropped to Maya's now obvious baby bump at 23 weeks, then back to Alex, and Maya watched her mother's expression cycle through surprise, confusion, and calculation in rapid succession. "Mom, this is Alexander Hale. Alex, this is my mother, Linda." Maya's voice came out more nervous than she'd intended. They'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of introducing the man she loved to her mother while pregnant with his late wife's biological child. It was complicated in ways that defied easy explanation. "So you're the billionaire," Linda said, shaking Alex's hand with surprising firmness. Come in, come in. I made tea. Maya tells me you're fond of tea." She ushered them into the small living room, where photos of Maya's childhood covered every surface, and the furniture was worn but clean. Alex looked around with genuine interest, not the condescension Maya had feared, but actual curiosity about the space where she'd grown up. They settled on the couch while Linda poured tea from a pot decorated with faded flowers. "Now," she said, fixing them both with the look that had made Maya confess every childhood transgression, "tell me what's really going on. And don't leave anything out." Maya took a deep breath and told her everything: the initial surrogacy agreement, the pregnancy complications, falling in love despite their intentions, their decision to build a family together. She explained about Sarah, about the embryos, about the fact that Alex's late wife was technically the genetic mother of the baby Maya was carrying. She watched her mother's face throughout the explanation, trying to gauge her reaction, but Linda's expression remained carefully neutral. When Maya finally finished, there was a long silence broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. "Well," Linda finally said, "that's certainly more complicated than I expected. Here I thought you were just going to tell me you'd fallen for a rich man and gotten pregnant the old-fashioned way." "Mom," Maya protested, but Linda held up a hand. "Let me talk to Alex alone for a minute. Go make yourself useful in the kitchen. There are dumplings in the freezer that need steaming." Maya opened her mouth to argue, then caught the steel in her mother's eyes and recognized that tone. She was getting dismissed like a child, sent to her room while the adults talked. She glanced at Alex, who nodded encouragingly and reluctantly retreated to the kitchen, though she left the door open so she could eavesdrop. She was shameless about it. This was her life they were discussing. "My daughter is the most important person in my world," Linda said without preamble. "Probably in any world. I almost died bringing her into this life, and I've spent every day since trying to give her the best life I could manage. Do you have any idea what it cost her to watch me get sick? To take care of me instead of going to college or pursuing her dreams?" From the kitchen, Maya could hear Alex's quiet response. "I can only imagine. She's told me about the sacrifices she made. It's one of the things I love about her, her loyalty, her devotion to the people she cares about." There was a pause. "Mrs. Chun, I know the situation is unusual. I know you have every right to be skeptical of my intentions. If I were in your position, I would be too. But I need you to understand something. I'm not with Maya because she's carrying my child. I'm with her because she's the most remarkable person I've ever met. She makes me laugh. She challenges me. She made me want to live again instead of just exist." Linda was quiet for a moment. "You loved your first wife very much." "It wasn't a question." "I did," Alex confirmed. "I still do in a way. But Sarah would want me to be happy. She would want our daughter to grow up in a home full of love, not haunted by grief. And she would have liked Maya. They were similar in a lot of ways. Strong, independent kind." His voice grew stronger, more certain. "I can't promise you that everything will be perfect, but I can promise you that I will spend every day trying to make your daughter happy, that I will never take her for granted, and that both she and our baby will want for nothing, not materially and, more importantly, not emotionally." "Money doesn't impress me, Mr. Hale," Linda said sharply. "I've been poor my whole life, and I raised a damn good daughter without it. What impresses me is character. Integrity. Showing up when things get hard." Maya heard her mother shift in her seat. "So here's what I want to know. What happens if Maya decides this life isn't for her? What happens if she wakes up one day and realizes she doesn't fit in your billionaire world? What happens if the tabloids go after her, or your rich friends look down on her, or she feels like she's lost herself trying to be someone she's not? Will you let her go? Or will you make her feel trapped?" The question hung in the air, and Maya held her breath waiting for Alex's answer. "If Maya ever wants to leave, I won't stop her," Alex said quietly. "I would be devastated, but I would never make her feel trapped. As for the rest, yes, there will be challenges. The media attention, the social expectations, the adjustments to a different lifestyle. But I fell in love with exactly who Maya is right now. I don't want her to change. If anything, I'm the one who needs to change to be worthy of her. And for what it's worth, the people in my life who matter have already met her and adored her. The ones who wouldn't, they don't matter." Maya heard her mother stand up, and she quickly busied herself with the dumplings, though her hands were shaking. A moment later, Linda appeared in the kitchen doorway. "He'll do," she said simply, but her eyes were bright with tears. "He's either very good at lying or he really loves you. I'm choosing to believe the latter." She pulled Maya into a fierce hug, whispering in her ear, "Be happy, baby girl. You deserve it. You deserve all of it. The love, the family, the fairy tale ending." Don't let fear hold you back from claiming it. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, the three of them, eating dumplings and looking through old photo albums while Linda told embarrassing stories from Maya's childhood. Alex laughed at the right moments, asked thoughtful questions, and treated Linda with a respect and warmth that made Maya fall even more in love with him. When it was time to leave, Linda hugged them both, holding on to Maya just a bit longer. "Bring her back to visit me," she told Alex. "And bring my granddaughter once she's born. I intend to spoil her rotten." Alex promised, and Maya saw him blink back tears as they walked to the car. "Your mother is incredible," Alex said as they drove back to his estate. "I can see where you get your strength from." Maya reached over and took his hand, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. 6 months ago, she'd been desperate and alone, signing a contract with a stranger out of necessity. Now she was in love, pregnant with a daughter she'd get to help raise, building a future with a man who saw her, really saw her, and chose her anyway. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For respecting her, for being patient with this whole complicated situation, for loving me even though I come with baggage and complications, and a mother who interrogates people like she's running a background check." Alex brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "Your mother has every right to be protective. And you don't have baggage, Maya. You have history and experiences and people you love. That's not baggage. That's what makes you who you are. I'm honored that you're letting me be part of your story." As they pulled up to the house, Maya looked at the sprawling estate that had once seemed so foreign and intimidating. Now it felt like home. Not because of the luxury or the space, but because Alex was there. Because their daughter's nursery was waiting upstairs. Because she'd found something she hadn't even known she was looking for, a family, a future, a love that transformed everything it touched. The third trimester arrived with a vengeance, bringing swollen ankles, backaches, and a level of exhaustion Maya hadn't thought possible. At 32 weeks pregnant, she felt like she was carrying a bowling ball that had somehow learned to kick her ribs with surprising force. Their daughter, they'd named her Lily after Alex's mother, was active and healthy, performing acrobatics that kept Maya awake at night and made Alex laugh with delight every time he felt her move. They'd officially moved Maya into the main house, into Alex's bedroom, though he'd been so nervous about asking that she'd finally just started leaving her things there until the question became moot. Waking up beside him each morning, his hand inevitably resting on her belly, felt like the most natural thing in the world. But with the joy came anxiety. Maya found herself panicking about things she'd never considered when she'd signed the surrogacy contract. What if she was a terrible mother? What if Lily cried and she didn't know how to comfort her? What if she made a mistake that hurt their daughter? Alex assured her constantly that they'd figure it out together, that no parent knew what they were doing at first, that love was more important than perfection. But late at night, when insomnia and pregnancy hormones conspired against her, Maya would lie awake cataloging all the ways she could fail this tiny person who depended on her. The baby shower was Alex's idea, though Maya had protested that it seemed excessive given how much they'd already bought for Lily. "It's not about getting things," Alex had explained. "It's about celebrating with the people who care about you, about introducing you to my world as my partner, not just as the surrogate." So they'd invited friends and family to the house, and Maya had been overwhelmed by the turnout. Her mother came in a wheelchair, still too weak from treatment to stand for long but radiant with happiness. Alex's business partners and their wives attended, along with several of his college friends and even his former sister-in-law, Sarah's younger sister Emma, who'd driven up from San Diego. Maya had been terrified to meet Emma, worried that Sarah's family would resent her for replacing their beloved daughter and sister. But Emma had embraced her warmly, tears streaming down her face as she felt Lily kick. "Sarah would be so happy," Emma had whispered. "She always said Alex deserved to be a father. And she'd be glad he found someone to love again, someone who makes him smile like he used to. Thank you for giving him that. Thank you for giving us Lily." The acceptance, the blessing from Sarah's family, had meant more to Maya than she could express. It felt like permission to fully claim this life, this love, without guilt or reservation. The party was beautiful, Soft pastels and flowers everywhere, games that made everyone laugh. Presents piled so high Maya couldn't see how they'd use everything. But the best part was watching Alex move through the crowd, his hand constantly seeking hers, introducing her to people as my partner and the woman I love, with such pride that Maya felt beautiful despite her swollen feet and the fact that she was currently the size of a house. He gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about second chances and unexpected blessings, and how sometimes the things we think we've lost forever come back to us in different forms. That night, after everyone had left and they were lying in bed surrounded by tiny clothes and baby blankets, Alex turned to Maya with sudden seriousness. "Marry me," he said. Not a question, but not quite a statement either. Something in between, tentative and hopeful. Maya's breath caught. They talked about the future in abstract terms, about raising Lily together and maybe having more children someday, but marriage hadn't been explicitly discussed. "Alex," she started, but he put a gentle finger to her lips. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been together as a couple for a few months, even though we've known each other longer. I know there are people who'll say I'm rebounding or that it's too soon after Sarah. But Maya, I'm 38 years old. I've loved and lost before. I know what matters, and what matters is you. It's waking up beside you every morning. It's watching you grow our daughter and knowing you're going to be an incredible mother. It's building a life with someone who challenges me and supports me and makes me want to be better. So yes, it's fast. But when you know, you know. And I know." He reached into the nightstand drawer and pulled out a velvet box, opening it to reveal a stunning ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, vintage and unique. "This was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to her when I was born. I want you to have it if you'll have me. I want to make this official, to stand up in front of everyone who matters and promise to love you for the rest of my life. Will you marry me, Maya-chan? Will you be my wife, Lily's mother, my partner in everything?" Maya looked at the ring, then at Alex's face, vulnerable and open and full of love. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate job advertisement to sterile contract signing to this moment, pregnant and in love and being offered everything she'd ever wanted. She thought about her mother's blessing, about Emma's acceptance, about the baby currently using her bladder as a trampoline. She thought about how scared she'd been 6 months ago and how brave she felt now. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll be your wife and Lily's mother and your partner in everything. Yes to all of it." Alex slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along, and kissed her with such tenderness that Maya felt her heart might burst from happiness. They'd started with a contract, but they were building something so much better, a covenant, a commitment, a love that would last far beyond any legal document. In 8 weeks, their daughter would be born. And sometime after that, Maya would walk down an aisle and choose Alex all over again, this time with the whole world as witness. It was more than she'd ever dreamed possible. It was everything. Maya's water broke at 3 in the morning on July 10th, 5 days before her due date. She woke Alex by shaking his shoulder urgently, whispering, "I think it's time," with a mix of excitement and terror in her voice. He bolted upright so fast he nearly fell out of bed, then spent 5 frantic minutes running around the room gathering bags they'd already packed, checking the car seat installation for the 100th time, and calling Dr. Morrison to meet them at the hospital. Maya watched his controlled chaos with amusement, timing her contractions on her phone app and trying not to panic. This was happening. After 9 months of preparation, their daughter was ready to make her entrance into the world. The labor was long and difficult. What started as manageable contractions escalated into waves of pain that made Maya grip Alex's hand so hard she was sure she'd broken bones. He never complained, never left her side, breathing through each contraction with her and whispering encouragement when she was convinced she couldn't do this anymore. 14 hours in, when Maya was exhausted and crying and swearing she'd never do this again, Alex leaned close to her ear. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he said fiercely. "You can do this." Just a little longer, and we'll get to meet our daughter. Come on, love. You've got this. At 7:23 p.m. on July 10th, after one final overwhelming push, Lily Grace Hale entered the world screaming her displeasure at the bright lights and cold air. But the moment the nurse placed her on Maya's chest, she quieted, her tiny eyes trying to focus on her mother's face. Maya stared down at this perfect, tiny human, all 7 pounds and 3 ounces of her, and felt her entire world shift on its axis. "Oh my God," she whispered, touching Lily's impossibly soft cheek with a shaking finger. "Alex, look at her. Look what we made." But when Maya looked up at Alex, she found him frozen beside the bed, staring at his daughter with tears streaming down his face, his expression caught between overwhelming joy and devastating grief. "She has Sarah's nose," he whispered. "Her chin. Oh God, she looks just like her." And Maya understood in that moment the complexity of what they'd created. This baby was both a gift and a reminder, a miracle and a heartbreak, a new beginning and an ending. Lily was Sarah's daughter in biology, carrying the genetic legacy of a woman who'd never get to hold her. But she was also theirs, born from Maya's body and already loved beyond measure by both of them. "Do you want to hold her?" Maya asked gently, seeing the war of emotions on Alex's face. He nodded, unable to speak, and carefully took Lily from Maya's arms. The moment his daughter settled against his chest, something in him seemed to break open. He held her with infinite tenderness, touching her tiny fingers, counting her toes, whispering promises about all the things he'd teach her and show her and how loved she would always be. "Your mom would have adored you," he told Lily, his voice thick with tears. "She wanted you so much. She'd be so happy you're finally here." Then he looked at Maya, still crying, and said, "Thank you. Thank you for the most precious gift anyone has ever given me. Thank you for loving me enough to do this. Thank you for being brave and strong and perfect. I love you so much." Maya was crying too now, overwhelmed by exhaustion and hormones and love and the sheer magnitude of what they'd just accomplished. "I love you too," she managed. "Both of you. My family." They called Linda from the hospital room, holding the phone so she could see her granddaughter's face. Maya's mother wept openly, already making plans to visit as soon as she was strong enough. They called Emma, who promised to drive up the next day. They took 1,000 photos and videos, documenting every tiny yawn and stretch and expression that crossed Lily's face. And when visiting hours were over and the nurses insisted Alex had to leave, he kissed Maya's forehead and then Lily's, looking torn about leaving them even for a few hours. "We'll be fine," Maya assured him. "Go home, shower, sleep a little. Come back in the morning." But after he left, she lay awake for hours, unable to stop staring at the small plastic bassinet beside her bed where Lily slept. She'd carried this baby for 9 months, felt every kick and hiccup, talked to her constantly about all the adventures they'd have. But it wasn't until now, seeing her daughter's actual face, that the reality hit. Maya was a mother. Not a surrogate, not a vessel, but a real mother to this real baby who would depend on her for everything. The fear came then, sharp and visceral. What if she wasn't enough? What if Lily needed Sarah instead? What if Maya made mistakes that couldn't be fixed? But then Lily made a small sound in her sleep, a tiny sigh of contentment, and Maya felt something click into place. Biology didn't make a mother. Love did. Showing up did. And Maya had been showing up since the day she signed that contract, had been loving this baby since she first heard her heartbeat, had been mothering Lily in every way that mattered. 6 weeks later, on a perfect August evening in the garden where roses bloomed in impossible profusion, Maya walked down an aisle lined with their closest friends and family. Linda sat in the front row, stronger now after a promising new treatment, holding 8-week-old Lily, who was miraculously sleeping through the ceremony. Emma stood as Alex's best woman, beaming with approval. And at the end of the aisle stood Alex, devastatingly handsome in a simple gray suit, looking at Maya like she was every answer he'd ever needed. The ceremony was short and intimate. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Maya's turn, She looked into Alex's eyes and said, "6 months ago, I agreed to be your surrogate. I agreed to carry your child, and then walk away. But you made walking away impossible because you showed me what love actually looks like. Not the fairy tale version, but the real thing. The messy, complicated, beautiful reality of two broken people choosing to heal together. You taught me that families aren't always born. Sometimes they're built, piece by piece, choice by choice. So today, I'm not just marrying you. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing this family we've created against all odds. For today, for tomorrow, for the rest of our lives." Alex's vows were equally emotional, his voice breaking as he promised to love her through every season, to honor both the woman she was and the mother she'd become, to build a life where Lily would grow up knowing she was wanted by everyone who mattered. When the officiant pronounced them married and Alex kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, Maya heard their guests cheering and Lily starting to fuss and thought, "This is it. This is the happily ever after I never believed existed." Later, at the reception, Alex pulled her onto the dance floor for their first dance. As they swayed together to a song about second chances and new beginnings, Maya looked over his shoulder at all the people who'd come to celebrate with them. Her mother, finally cancer-free after the latest scans. Emma, already asking when they'd give Lily a sibling. Their friends, smiling and happy. And in Linda's arms, little Lily, awake now and looking around with wide, curious eyes. "What are you thinking?" Alex murmured against her hair. Maya smiled, tightening her arms around her husband. Her husband. "I'm thinking about how I agreed to carry your baby for 9 months," she said. "But I ended up carrying your heart forever. And you know what? It's exactly the weight I was meant to bear." Alex pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining with love and gratitude and hope for all the tomorrows they'd share. "Forever sounds perfect," he whispered, and kissed her again as their daughter gurgled and the last rays of summer sun painted everything gold. They'd started with a contract, but they'd built something eternal. They'd started as strangers, but they'd become a family. And as Maya danced with her husband under the stars, their daughter watching from her grandmother's arms, she knew with absolute certainty that every risk she'd taken, every fear she'd faced, every vulnerable moment had been worth it. Because love, real, complicated, choose-you-everyday love, was always worth it.